House in Baltimore. And Jones and I will be broadcasting live via satellite on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube Live and anywhere WNST reaches you beginning on Monday. This guy had a plane ticket and extra long johns packed. He's usually down there at Ponte Vedra having a good time in Jacksonville. He is the pride of the West Side and Woodlawn, and now a legendary, long time, going on 3 decades down there in Jacksonville. Sam Cavaris joins us live via satellite from the deposed Jacksonville Jaguars headquarters, where you had your long johns packed now. I mean, I know those Jaguar fans, they showed up in New England. We had the Eagles fans entertaining those nice Minnesota nice folks. Hey, man, you had a lead in the fourth quarter, Sam. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, that's
right.
You'd like to think that you could finish the act there with that defense, but alas, it was a learning experience, as they say, right?
Well, I think a big part of that is absolutely true, and the players even said that in the locker room afterwards, that they knew now what it takes. You have to play nearly perfect, and some local fans got mad at me when I said, a couple of years ago at the Super Bowl, I asked Sam Huff about the 58 and 59 championship games. Of course, 58 game goes into overtime, and it was close, but then the Colts won easily in 59 over the Giants. And I said, it's the 58 game celebrated and close. What was the deal in 59? And he looked at me and goes, they had unitis. We didn't. He said, our quarterback was fine. And I said that, look, Blake played well. The team played well. They made a couple of mistakes. They had Brady. We didn't. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, he converts that 3rd and 18 in the fourth quarter. And, I broke that play down last night on the air, and he does such a great job in looking the linebackers off to the left of the running back running the wheel route, and then just throws it to a spot where he knows Amendola is going to be. You don't convert 3rd and 18 in the fourth quarter against the second-ranked defense in the NFL, but they did. And, those are the kind of things that can happen when you play against a guy who's got that kind of experience and still has that kind of talent at 40 years old.
Well, let's back up just a minute on the civic side of this. I mean, you're a Baltimore guy, Colts guy. You go down there to Jacksonville. They wind up getting a team. You've covered that team from the beginning. Clearly, and I know you and I talked about this a month ago when I was writing the Ghost of Baltimore Football, Past, Present, and Future. You were a big part of my research on the past side of that, along with the Vince Bagley types and all of that to say, and the Stedmans and all of that to say. I remember when it started to fall apart. In Jacksonville, you've never had parades down there. I mean, Florida State, other distractions, the Florida-Georgia game, things that go on down there that have never really made the Jaguars what the Ravens have been, which is 22 consecutive years where every seat in the building's filled every week, all the time. Jacksonville hasn't had that. So when you get a little taste of this year, after all of those awful years, Sam, I put you on here for many, many years where it's the, are they going to win 3 games? Or are they going to win 5 games this year? And all the head coaches you've gone through since Del Rio, and this was the year where at least the franchise should be getting better. Do you feel that at all? Do you feel like that it won't be tarps over the upper deck there next year in some way?
Well, the big thing about the tarps is that the stadium is built to accommodate the Florida-Georgia game and what's now known as the Tax Slayer Bowl, and that's mandated by the city council. The stadium is just like the Ravens Stadium, 67,000 seats, but it's scalable up to 85,000 for those 2 games. So that's the reason for the tarps. When the Jaguars came in '95, it sold out as the people's civic duty. In '96, they went to the AFC Championship game and coincidentally lost to the Patriots. But they went to the playoffs 4 consecutive years, and there was not an empty seat in the house all the way into 2000.
Oh, I was down there when Eric Zier tripped on John Ogden on a 2-point conversion. It would have beat Brunell and you guys. I mean, we couldn't win down there, remember? I mean, right. Jacksonville just cleaned our clocks when we were in the same division.
Yeah, and that was, that was an exciting time, and it really showed what winning does. I mean, there's a lot of that. And this year it started to come back because, particularly late in the year, because it was such a surprise. It won't surprise me at all next year, if the place is packed, and certainly the schedule as well. I mean, when you win the division, you have to play the other division winners. So New England's coming here, Pittsburgh's coming here. They're playing the Eagles in London. You know, the schedule is very attractive for any kind of football fan. You'll see the place sold out, and for the first time in 6 years, the Jaguars will have some primetime games. Probably that New England game will probably be a Sunday night game. In fact,
I've had so many of you on for so many years. We played against you guys, and I think everybody here knows the London story and the one-game giveaway and Shad Khan and sort of the, you know, veiled threat that maybe somewhere down the line either the Jaguars or another team would live in London. We've now been to London and experienced that, including the 41-0 butt kicking that I was looking at while people were still having Bloody Marys back here. But I would think that for the league, as nice as it is to have a Patriots, Eagles, and the Boston, Philadelphia markets and all that stuff, there was a point for the league when the Jaguars can get this close at this time that really might have pushed things even further along in Europe, right? Not just in London, because I was over there, and you've gone over many, many times. You know, it's not really about London. It's about German fans coming in and Dutch fans coming in, and you know, it is about London, and it's not necessarily even about the Jaguars. It's about the whole league. But the league would and Shad would like the Jaguars to be a home team when they're there, like a real home team. You know, putting them in a Super Bowl probably would have really helped a place where you got 15 million people that you're trying to woo, right?
Yeah, I think this year's run will even accelerate that. You know, when we first went to London with the Jaguars 5 years ago, you know, there was a smattering of Jaguar jerseys, but there were jerseys from virtually every team, and it was just kind of an NFL celebration. The next year, a few more Jaguar jerseys. This past year, I can tell you, having been there 5 years, about half the fans there were wearing Jaguar jerseys who were wearing jerseys and identified themselves as Jaguar fans. And, of course, that's a story we've done many times. And the people from all over Europe, as you mentioned, come in. I'm pretty good with accents, and I couldn't quite make where this one guy was from. And he said, "Oh, I'm from Warsaw." And I said, "And you just came in for the game?" He goes, "Oh, no, I'm a Jaguar fan." I said, "Oh, really? Why?" He said, I became an NFL fan in the early 90s. And I don't know where Carolina is, but I know where Florida is. And I'm a Jaguar fan.
Sam, that's all we did was sit over there and just literally, I took pictures with people from every, and
right.
It was it blew my mind. It really did. And everybody told me, Baldinger, you know, Rosen, all my friends that have been over there, they're like, it's going to blow your mind. And it blew my mind. It really did. And that's why I was watching the game, and when the 10-point lead was up, I'm like, man, this is the league has had such a hard time here this year, right? Like Baltimore, but America, Colin Kaepernick, all of that stuff. You know, for the league to have invested so much in Europe, the Jaguars holding on the other day was worth a lot of money to the league, and I think to Shad. But to your point, I don't think it. But I think if the Jaguars returned as Super Bowl champions to London, I think that would would just change everything for the league over there. It really would.
And who knows the way they're built? They're at the peak of their competitive cycle now. They're built to be this kind of team for the next couple of years. Although, as you know, you never can predict one year to the next. I talked to Roger Goodell 2 weeks ago, and he absolutely believes that the Jaguars will 1 year, if not this coming year, but maybe in 2020, will stay in Europe and play as the visitor the following week. And I said to him, Shad would like to play a game in Germany or Spain. And he looked at me and laughed, and I've known him forever. He was the number one patron in the NFL office when we were trying to get the team. And he looked at me and he goes, "We don't have enough games for Shad over there," because Shad really would like to play a game in Barcelona. He'd like to play a game in Munich. And while you consistently call this thing the London giveaway, it now has accounted for 23% of the revenues of the Jaguars, and it's one of the reasons that the Jaguars are now worth $2.4 billion instead of the $770 million that Shad bought them for just 5 years ago.
You're doing the math on this. He is Sam Kavaris. He is a Baltimorean. We will continue to claim him from Woodlawn, although, how many years in Jacksonville for you now?
37 here, and I was talking to somebody the other day, and they heard me on with you, and
no one listens to me. That's impossible, Sam.
Yeah.
No one listens to this station. Trust me, believe me.
And they said, "Are you really from Woodlawn?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Was it kind of a tough neighborhood when you were there?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, we had all ethnic groups, races. We had all kinds of people. That's kind of the way I grew up, and I grew up in downtown Baltimore as well at my grandparents' house right there at Fulton Avenue and Reisterstown Road." And the guy said, "You go to Woodlawn High?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, we were freshmen, I want to say, or sophomores. I want to say Randallstown was a brand new high school. We were Western Division champs, and we beat them 41-0. And Milford Mill was our big rival. Is that still the case? I guess?
Joe Boylan tells me that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we had an Indian, a warrior, as our mascot, and we had a bust of a warrior in front of the school. So they came over and painted it green the week of our game.
Ooh.
And of course, in retaliation, we went over and burned their library down. So, that's kind of the neighborhood that I grew up in at the time.
Yeah, we're Dundalk, and they were Patapsco, and they were Patriots, and we were Owls, and we tried to play nice with Merritt Boulevard between the two. But we all have the neighborhood story, and I mean the Baltimore-Jacksonville thing is its own thing, and I'll tell you this: no one wanted to see the Patriots, and now we put this Eagles team going out to Minnesota, and I'll be out there freezing next week, Sam. For the Eagles, they were like all Ravens people, top to bottom. Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel, to Jimmy Schwartz down onto the field, and Torrey Smith. So for the first time in my life, being a Baltimore guy, I am compelled to, as Joe Boylan said to me earlier this week, I'm not an Eagles fan, but I'm going to be pulling for the Eagles.
Right, and that and people, a lot of people don't understand, but that's absolutely the truth. And when you look at it, from our standpoint, it makes our jobs so much better when the team is winning. And we still have a vested interest in the Super Bowl. By the way, I'll be there as well. I'm the Jacksonville representative on the Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame committee.
Oh, you're going to bless Ray Lewis next Saturday night.
And I no doubt Ray Lewis will be a first ballot inductee or selection. But for the second consecutive year, I'll present Tony Pacelli as a candidate, and I think he has an excellent chance of being elected this year. So it'll be interesting. I mean, when you look at Jonathan Ogden and Pacelli and Walter Johnson and Orlando Pace, those guys and a couple of other tackles in that era, all those tackles say that Pacelli was the best of the five. And last year we put Kenny Easley and Terrell Davis in. Both played 89 and 78 games respectively. Pacelli played 97 games in the league, and that seemed to be the knock against him, that his career was too short. But when you start only qualifying people based on greatness, Pacelli checks every box there. So I think he's got some sentiment to be selected this year. Ray Lewis, he'd get McCrary's vote. Yeah, he would. You're right. And I quoted McCrary last year in the meeting. And the other, you talk about 97 games, and of course people have been around for a while. Remember when the league had games, a season was 12 games, and then 14, and now 16. So you think of a guy like Paul Hornung, iconic NFL guy who, face of the NFL in the 60s. I mean, Paul Hornung played 105 games in the league. That's less than half a season more than Tony Pacelli. So, those are the kind of statistics that you really don't think about when you're just kind of thinking, does the guy pass the eye test? And certainly I think Pacelli passes the eye test as well. Yeah, I know how seriously all of you take the Hall of Fame voting and stuff. And, meanwhile, we had the Baseball Hall of Fame thing going on this week. And, friends of Messina and Schilling and whatever, in and out, and politics and the drugs and the steroids and all that stuff. I don't know what the complications are on the football side, but if you were a bad guy, if you were Terrell Owens having agents doing push-ups in the parking lot on ESPN, you don't get as quick a nod in your room. I'll tell you that, right? Yeah. Well, we're very tightly bound to the bylaws, and we're told all the time and every year about how we can't consider off-field things. Ray Lewis's legal problems. We're not allowed to even discuss that. Lawrence Taylor's off-field escapades. Not allowed to discuss that. And if you did that, you'd have to go back and throw, half the guys out of the hall. So they're very specific about that. Terrell Owens is a little different story because the question is, if we're going to say that football is the greatest team game there is and pontificate about that, should what kind of teammate you were count toward your resume of greatness? Now, I don't know the answer to that, but that's the question that's asked. And
if you were so great, why did anyone want you?
And why did you get thrown off of 5 teams? And why do so many of your teammates on the record and management and coaches on the record solicit Hall of Fame members to make sure that they know that you don't want them in the Hall of Fame? I mean, it's a pretty compelling case. I mean, if football is the ultimate team game, what kind of teammate you are should it count.
Next week, I mean, I know you're doing the homework on all these guys, and Owens is one of these guys. Moss, I mean, guys we saw play the game, including Baselli, who, I think it is a compelling case. I'd love to be in that room and hear that. And, I always say, I've been covering the league now 22 years, my 25th Super Bowl. Maybe one day I'll be that guy in the Baltimore room. And if I were asked to do it, would I want to do it? 15 years ago, I'd have been like, yeah, I want to do it. Now, honest to God, if you guys came to me and said, do you want to do it? I'd have to think about it a little bit and say, now, exactly what does it entail? Because I know it's for all of you, and it's always been it's a pretty heavy little burden when you've got Art Monk's people yelling at you, or whomever's people yelling at you, or even coming in and saying, "Hey, keep that guy out." And I think it's a lot heavier than most people think. For you next week, some thoughts about some of the other candidates that are perennially coming back in and out. We don't hear Art Modell's name around here, and that's another sore subject for me as well when it comes to Canton.
Well, there are five offensive linemen on the ballot. The way it works is that the nominees are sent out to the committee. This year, I think there were 108 on the original list. We're asked to cut that down via email or regular mail to 25. Then those 25 are called semifinalists, and then we're asked to cut that list down to 15. So those 15 are finalists, and they get discussed in the room Saturday before the Super Bowl. There also are alternating 2 senior and 1 contributor, or 2 contributor and 1 senior candidate each year. So 18 guys are eligible. The senior candidate and the 2 contributors, or in this case this year, the 2 senior candidates and the contributor, get discussed first and then get an up or down vote, of which, by the way, we don't know the result.
Fair enough.
And then it goes off. And we don't find out until you guys find out at the end of the night these days on that NFL Honors Show. And then by random selection, by position, the different positions are discussed, and the 15 players are discussed in both pros and cons. And the person who represents the city that they most played their career in, for instance, Baselli played most of his career here in Jacksonville, is asked and charged with the task of presenting his career to the full committee. It puts you in a little bit of a kind of a patron's situation as a reporter, because you're advocating for this guy. You're not kind of pointing out the bad parts. You're just advocating for this guy to be in the hall, and that's that's a conflict for some people. I know, like the Washington Post doesn't allow their people to be on the
advocate or present, right? Right? So, Joe Jacoby is going to be presented by Dan Snyder's employee, essentially,
exactly, right? By Larry Michael, and that's a big issue on the committee.
As it should be.
And I totally agree, because, one of the things is, Larry Michael, who I'm sure is a fine guy.
And I know Larry well. Larry's a fine guy, but he works for Dan Snyder, and he's not allowed to.
And he's the vice president there as well. And so in the room, we're given the promise of confidentiality. If I vote against Joe Jacoby, or if I say something against Joe Jacoby, does Larry Michael tell Dan Snyder, who's on the advisory board for the Hall of Fame, And then does Dan Snyder then say something to David Baker, who's the president of the Hall of Fame, who then somehow gets me removed? I don't know. It's a real tough ethical question when you start getting the teams involved and the politics involved.
I mean, the Baseball Hall of Fame is a disgrace. I mean, Marvin Miller's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I mean, it's right. Outrageous. But that's why no offense to you or anyone else, and I'll talk Hall of Fame, and we're going to run a trip out to Ray Lewis for Canton. I'm already selling trips out there. We're going out to Cleveland, doing baseball, rock and roll, doing all that. People here are excited about it, but there is a point with these Hall of Fames, all of them. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame too. Where. Boy, as you get older, the political side of all this, and you become exposed to it, or even you on the inside of it, you do scratch your head. I mean, anybody that's watched the Baseball Hall of Fame thing unfold like you and me that loves baseball, I don't even know how you adjudicate the filth that we saw of that era, where I still watch Brady Anderson walk around like he hit the same 50 home runs as Frank Robinson, and it makes me laugh. I mean, it literally, he still walks around like it's legitimate. You know what I mean? He's
really?
Every day he would Brady Anderson would never, ever admit that he even knew what a steroid was. So, wow. I mean, that's where we are.
Is that why his hat size was 8 that year?
I have no idea, but that's for you to decide, Sam. But I think it does diminish Hall of Fames, and I'll say this, and maybe this is a good time for you to give a plug for my bus trip here. But the Hall of Fame in Canton was always very underwhelming for me. I would drive through there on these Cleveland bus trips 10, 12, 15 years ago, and it felt like, man, does nobody love this place? I mean, I went in there one time, and Lenny Moore's head on his bust was defamed with racial nasty stuff on his head in the Hall of Fame. Wow. And I'm thinking to myself, does anybody, not let alone the Baltimore Indianapolis thing, that really kind of rubbed everybody here wrong at that point. But now they can't pour enough money into it. They're making it an amusement park, right? I mean, it's literally going to be Walt Disney World out there, right?
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular. Tom Benson, the owner of the Saints, has donated a bunch of money, and that's one of the reasons they named the field after him. But they're building a hotel, interactive stuff. They made a presentation to us last year of what it's going to look like by 2019, and it, like you said, it's going to be Disney World. It's pretty spectacular, and rightfully so for a game that makes millions and billions of dollars. If they're going to celebrate their players and the people associated with the game like that, it should have some sort of commensurate feel when you walk into it.
Well, I tell you what, I always appreciate your time. Love having you on. Love your insights and wisdom. Hope to see you next week. I kind of just forgotten that you're going to be there too. Do you have appropriate wear? I mean, I'm giving you a hard time about your little golf club lifestyle down there in Jacksonville. I would say bring me a little bit of sand from the beach, but you're going to be out in Minnesota for the weekend. I am disappointed, not for Jimmy Schwartz or any of my dear friends with the Eagles, Torrey and those guys, but there would have really been something special about the Vikings having won that game on Sunday.
Yeah, that would have been something different. But I'll tell you what, the Eagles continue under Peterson to really show that they're legitimate, and I think that's why it hurts so bad when you lose, because the Jaguars thought that they were legitimate. They were considered pretenders by so many people from the outside, but when you really started to study it, they really believed they were going to beat the Patriots, and they feel like they let themselves down, and that's why it stings to them so bad.
Well, let the Blake Bortles watch begin down there in Jacksonville. Yep. Let the Eli Manning rumors surface, and you'll go cover all that. You can find Sam at samsportsline.com, and, of course, Sam Kavaris out on Twitter down there in Jacksonville, Florida. We'll see you out in Minnesota next week. Stay warm, Sam.
Right. Once you get there, you never have to go outside, but you got to get there.
Well, you get to meet the ultimate celebrity because my wife's producing the show on Thursday and Friday, so stop by the booth, perfect. All right?
Absolutely.
All right. You can take a picture with a real miracle. There he goes, Sam Kavaris, Kouvaris of Woodlawn, of Jacksonville, now 4 decades. The smartest guy, along with Chris Thomas, in the history of Baltimore TV broadcasting to make a residence down there in Florida covering the Jaguars. You can find me out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.